Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Osaze Obaseki Oserige. Tonight, in continuation of our program that started some few days ago on disaster readiness and generally called Disaster Management and Certification Program, we want to welcome our guest that somehow, due to network, we couldn't get to hear him yesterday. Is Professor Edwin Iguisi. He's going to be talking to us about disaster management. Basically, he's not going to start repeating everything we've learned in the class, but he's going to put a face to this lecture and just do a summary of what probably everybody should just know about disaster management. Then maybe we'll take 1 or 2, 3, 4 questions for him to respond to. And most importantly, we want him to also tell us how we can become experts in the field like himself, so that when he's retiring, we can start taking over his position and make him proud too. So thank you very much for your time, for your patience, for not being able to join the class yesterday, but today you've done so. Tell those that are not here that it is being recorded and they're going to get a copy. I want to hand over to our esteemed guest, Professor Edwin Iguisi. Thank you. Over to you, sir. You can unmute yourself now, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir. We can hear you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you. And I was supposed to meet with you yesterday. Today, we will see what we were supposed to see yesterday. The first thing I would like to emphasize is the common misunderstanding between hazard and disaster. And I'm sure we all are already clear about the distinction between these two concepts. A hazard is not synonymous with a disaster. We know that a disaster is when a hazard impacts on a community and the community is so overwhelmed that the community don't have the resources to cope with that impact, for which the community will now have to call for external support to assist. So it means, therefore, that hazard is the cause of a disaster. So there are two different things. So which means there can't be a disaster without a hazard. And so what is a hazard? What we normally teach students is that a hazard itself is a phenomenon that is injurious to a community, a phenomenon that can create a catastrophe in the community. Sorry, I missed out my introduction. I think Dr. Sazer mentioned that before. My name is Professor Edwin Iguisi. I'm the Pioneer Director of the Center for Disaster Risk Management and Development Studies at Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. I have worked extensively with the UNDP, the World Bank, the UNECA, the ECOWAS, and several other institutions in this country. I also worked very closely with NIMA when I was the director of the center. So back to the issue I was saying. So now, why are we concerned about disasters? Disasters can destroy a whole community. Disaster can destroy the livelihood of the people. Disaster can destroy the infrastructure that took several years to create. So we are concerned about disaster. Now, what is it that it has taken the front burner lately? Disasters are increasing in frequency and intensity lately because of 3 key reasons. One, you have the issue of climate change. That's a different thing we'll talk about maybe some other time. The climate change, because of the increasing temperature, increasing rainfall, a lot of hazards are emanating from this issue of climate change. The second key issue that is making disasters to be more frequent is the way we use our environment, our land use, unwholesome land use practices. You know, we are not very careful how we use our environment, and as a consequence, you find that disasters are on the increase. And thirdly, the vulnerability of our communities. Our communities are highly vulnerable to all these hazard impacts. And so if you have a disaster in your hand, how do you manage it? So that brings us to the issue of disaster risk management. And what we tell students, what we teach students in the university is that if we are concerned about reducing disaster risk in our community, there are three things we should know and do. And these are: one, we should know the nature of the hazard that we are dealing with. In other words, we should be able to assess the hazard that is impacting on that community. The second thing we should also know is the issue of vulnerability of the community. How vulnerable is the community? How exposed is the community? How susceptible is our community to this hazard? And thirdly, what capacity do we have in our community to manage this disaster? So let me take that again. Three key issues. One, we should know our hazard, which is basic. It's like when you go to the hospital and you're complaining of one problem or the other, and the doctor is not very sure. He asks you to go to the lab, go with your blood sample, urine sample, and from there they do some analysis, and that's what we call hazard analysis, hazard assessment. We want to know what the problem is, because we have the mind of solving that problem. So the second thing, like I said earlier, is that we want to know the vulnerability. How vulnerable, how susceptible the people are, the community are, how exposed they are. Maybe we'll come to that very soon later. Then, of course, the third one is the capacity. What do they have to handle this catastrophe? The French people call disaster catastrophe, and it has gone into popular English language, the catastrophe. So in general, we manage disaster risk in two ways. We have a set of activities that we can do before the disaster impact, before the incident. And secondly, you have another set of activities we could do after the disaster incident. Now, those activities we can do before the disaster incident are called disaster risk reduction activities. These are activities that we call, they are proactive. We do these activities with an attempt, with intention, with the mind to prevent, reduce, or mitigate the disaster impact. You can do this, if you do these activities well enough, you can get to a point that the disaster may be averted. You can actually eliminate the disaster if you do this set of activities. And this is why there's this emphasis on disaster risk reduction, DRR. Now, the second group of activities, like I said, will be the activities you do after the disaster incident. And these are things like you probably have, your lecturers or teachers taught you all these. These are things like the incident has happened and you are literally picking up the pieces. You know, the response, the recovery, the reconstruction, rehabilitation, and all of that. So these are the things you do after the incident. We call that emergency management. So disaster risk reduction, therefore, have these two key areas. And these are DRR and DM. DRR, disaster risk reduction, DM, disaster management. Collectively, together, we call that disaster risk reduction. And well, maybe some other time we'll talk more about all of this. Now, this brings us to the issue of the whole spectrum of managing disaster, which they call disaster management cycle, disaster risk, disaster management. So you can actually start, like I said earlier, you can start from prevention. One of the things I teach students is that the hazard is coming to the community. You try to prevent it. There are some hazards you can prevent. Things like flood is preventable. Now you try to prevent it, you are not able to prevent it, then you go into the second phase, which is called mitigation. Mitigation is a set of activities that you do to enable you to reduce the possible impact of the hazard on the community. Mitigation. Mitigation, you have both structural and non-structural mitigation. By structural and non-structural, I mean there are some activities you do that require you constructing maybe deep canals, deep gutters, and things like that. Okay? We can also have the non-structural, which are things like legislation, policies, laws, things like that. Now, when you need mitigation,
Doctor, good evening.
Hello, Dr. Sazi, are you still there? So, yes, you go to preparedness. Remember, I said you start with prevention. From prevention, you go to mitigation. From mitigation, you go to preparedness. Preparedness is you try to prevent it, it's not preventable. You try to reduce it, the impact is still very imminent. Then what you now do is that you go into the preparedness stage. Preparedness is putting all materials in place. All things you know you will require to put in place, you put them in place in case the incident still happens. Now you've done that and the incident happens. The next thing you now go to do is you go into the issue of response. That is the after the incident. The response is after the incident. You now go in there, and in the response phase, we are more concerned about lives. We are not concerned about properties for now. Lives, that's the response stage. Lives. Emergency response. We were trying to make sure if people are buried under the rubble, we want to bring them out. If there are emergency cases, you bring the medics, paramedics to handle all these things. Now, after the response phase, you go into recovery. Recovery is when you now try to pick up the pieces for the community, see how you can bring back some livelihood, some infrastructure and all of that. Then, of course, you now go to rehabilitation and reconstruction, rebuilding this, building that, broken down bridges, hospitals, clinics, schools that were knocked down. You start to bring them, build some temporary shelters, which they call IDP camps and all of that. So that's what they call the disaster management cycle, and it is complete. Now, let me say a little bit about this issue of preparedness, which is very, very key. Like I was saying, that if you do it well, you will not get into a disaster. Now, when you're talking about preparedness, there are a lot of things we can do. One, as simple as public enlightenment is part of the preparedness. preparedness, mitigation, and things like that. You're talking about development of plans, contingency planning. And you're talking about procurement of essential, both food and non-food items, things that are essential for the emergency phase, in case the emergency phase comes up. You know, as simple as the bandages, the iodine, all the kind of medications. And of course, the issue of blankets and buckets and lanterns and all sorts of things you require after the incident has occurred. So it's important that we know some of those things. And again, you find out that there is, from my own experience, there is this aspect we call early warning system. Early warning system appears to be key in your preparedness. What early warning system does is that it warns the people ahead of the incident. You can develop a robust early warning system such that you know when the hazard will impact on the community. You know the magnitude of the hazard. You know the frequency of the hazard. You know everything about the hazard. And so you can pre-warn the people. You can develop mechanism for people to get out of harm's way. So early warning system has helped many communities in different parts of the world. And from my own personal experience, we did some study here in Nigeria. We took the States. I worked with Christian Aid Nigeria. Christian Aid is an international NGO based in UK. They have a branch here in Nigeria. We did a study on managing flood in Nigeria. 3 states, Plateau, Benue, and Kaduna State. Now, we did a baseline survey at the onset of the study. We saw that the environment, most of in the states, there was no early warning system. Sorry, I'm responding to somebody's action here. We observed that there was no early warning system. The incidents were very frequent in those environments. And so what we did was to develop an early warning system. And when we deployed the early warning system, when we started to operate the early warning system, we discovered that the following year, the incident of flood was gone. Flood incident was gone for good in these 3 environments. So this is the sort of thing that we're talking about. So if we do what we're supposed to do before the incident, we can actually go a long way in reducing our disaster risk. Now, I would like to stop here for now and do a little bit about your career pathway before I entertain some questions. I'm looking at my time. I'm conscious of time and all of that. Career path for you. There's a lot of prospects in disaster management. Like I said earlier, I have worked for several organizations because the problem is always there. They need experts to work on these things. One of the areas I have observed we don't have manpower in disaster management is in the local government areas. Federal government of Nigeria designed disaster management to be in 4 layers. 4 layers. The first layer is at the federal level. That's why you see NEMA. The second layer is at the state level. That's why you see SEMA, State Emergency Management Agency. The third level is LEMCs, Local Emergency Management Committees, if you like, and call it local management at local government level. Then at the last level is the community. there's this thing we call community-based disaster risk management. Time will not permit us to go into all of that now. So you find that within these four strata, these four layers, NEMA appears to have sufficient capacity, human capacity, to manage disasters in Nigeria. But when you get to SEMA, we don't have the capacity. We don't have people. So your services will be required, will be needed at that level. Well, for Kaduna State, for some of you in Kaduna State and Lagos, well, those SEMAs are doing well. But for other states, maybe Kano also lately, for other states, they will require your services. The local government level, we don't have any expert. We don't have experts at that level. And yet, that is where it's more critical. Because we say disaster occur at community levels. Of course, at the community level, we don't even have any. So our intervention in Kaduna State, Plateau State, and Benue State, we try to make the community to be conscious of the need to have experts, people who are knowledgeable in disaster management at that level. And we're able to bring in some experts at that level, and they are working very well. Like in Kaduna State, for example, we developed what they call the DMMP. The DMMP is a stakeholder kind of association where you have people from different sectors of the community, and some are knowledgeable and some are still being trained and all of that. So you have that great opportunity. And secondly, you also have career pathway through the NGOs. The NGOs are very active in disaster management in Nigeria. Like I told you, the Christian Aid, for example, is doing quite a number of disaster management activities across the country. Several of them. So they will need your expertise. We also have the international bodies, what we call the development partners. Like I told you, I served as a consultant to ECOWAS, UNDP, UN, ECA, ECA, United Nations. I think these guys are based in East Africa or something like that. Economic Commission for Africa, yeah. United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I did some work for them and all of that. So there's a lot of pathway for all of that. You have the, you also have these people, humanitarian, who are doing humanitarian. UNICEF is also working on disaster management. You also have UN OCHA. So if you Google some of these things, you will see some advertising for job placings and space and all of that. So quite a number of things you can do. But again, let me also throw a little bit of caution or advice here. I want to congratulate you for the certificates you were awarded yesterday and some will be awarded today. But it should go beyond that. You should try and go beyond that. Here at the Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, we run postgraduate diploma programs in disaster management. We also run a master's degree program in disaster management, and we also run a PhD program in disaster management. Well, I'm not saying you should get as far as a PhD, but if you can get a postgraduate diploma so that you stay competitive, because when you start throwing your applications, in particularly to these development partners, UNDP, UN OCHA, UNICEF, they will want something like, a postgraduate diploma, in disaster management. ABU is not the only place we can do this. There are several, but you have 5 centers across the country representing, 6 centers in 6 geopolitical zones in the country. I know University of Ibadan is also running it for the Southwest. University of Port Harcourt is running it for the South. University of Nigeria, Enugu campus, UNECA, is running it for the Southeast. Ahmadu Bello University Zaria is running it for the you call it the Northwest. Federal University of Technology, Mina, is running for the North Central, while University of Maiduguri is running it for the Northeast Nigeria. Thank you so much. Because of time factor, let me stop here in case we have questions so that we can have sufficient time to go through a couple of questions. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, the professor himself. You can all see for yourself that what it took 3 days to run through in the class was done in less than 1 hour. So it shows the level of expertise that we've come to meet. Without taking so much of our time, I want to take questions from just 5 persons. Some hands are raised already. If your hand is raised, I'm going to lower it down. So I will be lowering all the hands that are raised now. Once your hand is raised now, I will not call you to ask your question, except those people that raise their hands after I call for raising up of hands. So if your hand is raised, you will not ask any question. You will not be called to ask question. And you can also type your question in the comment section. Yeah. If you raise your hand, I will not call you. You have to wait for the command to raise your hand. Then you can raise your hand. When I say raise your hand, it's not yet time. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we are going to just take 5 questions. And Mustafa, I will not call you. Yes, we are taking 5 questions. And from those people that will raise their hands right now, I just need 5 persons to raise their hand. Please don't repeat any question. Don't repeat any question. I know I'm going to see a lot of hands raised, but you are just picking 5. If you're my info, please, once you want to ask your question, just 1 minute and straight to the point. And we're going to create a Google form. For the sake of the thousands of people that are not here, we have close to 4,000 people that are not here. We're going to create a Google form and send to all the classes so that you can ask your question in the Google form. We'll hand it over to Prof. And I want to believe that Prof will be fully involved, though I'm here to discuss that with him, but I want to believe that he'll be very happy to know that we're also going to form a group of volunteers from this training and subsequent training we'll be having. So don't worry if your question is not answered here or if you cannot ask your question. Okay, Ifeoma, I4, please. Fast, over to you. Ifeoma, you raise your hand, but you're not saying anything. Unmute yourself.
All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir.
Evening.
Okay, I want to know if tonight's class is being recorded for the benefit of those that could not join.
Sure,
okay.
Sure, it's being recorded.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Okoroa for Alexander. Okoroa for, unmute yourself. Okay, I think Okoroa is not ready for us. Uzairu Dauda. Uzairu Dauda, are you there? Okay, let's move on. F. Ziba Agwaniru.
Yeah, good evening to you.
Evening.
Okay, I'm really so inspired and elated by what I heard from the prof. I want to ask, is there any way the prof can help us much more to get into some of these NGOs, you know, because the essence of this is actually to be part of this, you know, if there is any way we can be helped to get into practical aspect of this. Hello, sir.
Okay, over
Yes.
to you. Okay.
Yes. Are you hearing me, Doc?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, we can. Certainly, there are a lot of NGOs that are looking for people who have the requisite qualification, the interest to do this work. There are quite a number of them, and we can do the link. We can link you up, and I'm glad that we have this platform. And from this platform, we can pull a lot of resources from this platform and give to the NGOs. There are quite a number of NGOs that are looking for people who have the knowledge that you have acquired. Yeah, it can be done. We can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for that sharing news. As we can hear, we all have something to look forward to. It's not just all talk and talk. What I like about this program is that we are going to swing into action as soon as possible. And good enough, he mentioned the local government and the communities where our services will be needed. And I'm sure we are going to have everybody, our hands full, doing a lot of things. And one thing we are going to ask Prof for is to give us professional advice in departmentalizing our activities into preparedness and all the other sections so that we have people divided into these different sections. So you specialize in a specific area, and it makes it easy for you to actually get hooked up by some of these NGOs and others. And one more thing I want to add here is that we'll be doing a seminar very soon for you on how you can actually get a job with United Nations or United Nations volunteers. And apart from that, you're also going to be taught on how to upload your profile on these two bodies, their HR profile database, so they can always call up on you anytime. And added to what the Prof is going to be doing for us, I think you are already on your way to what you want to become. Okay, Haruna Emmanuel Idoko.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It's been a wonderful time. I think this meeting has actually, like you said earlier on, done an icing to the entire training. I want to ask if it's possible for us to get materials that we can study on our own.
Okay, yeah.
If one can get study materials that we can refer to on our own,
sure.
For further studies and training, those personal learning, so that we can improve on what we have already learned.
Sure, yeah. We'll be providing you further materials for further learning. The one you just did now, maybe by tomorrow, before Wednesday, don't worry.
Yes,
each person will be contacted with a link so that you can just wake up anytime to go and read up.
Wow, that'll be good.
And don't worry, you'll be shocked at all the things that will be hitting you very soon. You might be asking us to even slow down.
Wow, that'll be interesting. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Olatuposun Abdulaziz.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for this opportunity, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, my question for Prof. He emphasized so much about warning systems.
Yes.
But what I didn't hear him say is talk about how can we actually develop a robust and effective warning system. Thank you.
Over to you, Prof.
Yes, early warning system, developing an early warning system, it's a little bit technical. It's not something I can talk about in 2-3 minutes. I just mentioned early warning system. You can develop early warning system for a variety of hazards. Now, let me give you a very simple example. One outside the country and the one we did locally. If you are current with the international news, you will know that from the months of June to about August every year, the United States of America, for example, is impacted by hurricane every year. It's an annual thing. It's a seasonal thing. Now, what the United States of America did is that they developed a type of an early warning system that enables them to know when the hurricane starts from the Atlantic Ocean and propagates towards the coastal area, the mainland United States of America. So they're able to plot the pathway of the hurricane as it moves from the ocean into the land. And so they're able to warn people who are likely to be impacted along that track to move out of harm's way, because you can't stop a hurricane, because this is a storm, is an atmospheric phenomenon. We put it in the group of hydrometeorological phenomenon. You can't stop it, but you can warn people if you know what is happening and where it is coming from. So they have been able to do that using the satellite technology. We call it the NOAA satellite. So the satellite is able to monitor the hurricane from the time it develops and through the whole path as it goes into the mainland. So that's a form of an early warning system that has worked for them. In Nigeria here, we also develop an early warning system for flood. Like I said, my experience with these 3 states of Kaduna, Benue, and Plateau State. What we did was to put some gauge, what we call a stream gauge, in some rivers that were notorious for this flood thing. And from there, we're able to monitor the river level to the point when it becomes a hazard to the community. And people are warned that, look, henceforth, this river is going to, the level of water in this river is going to get into the community, and so people should move and all of that. But you see, to do a robust early warning system, you have 4 key components. The first one is you have to be able to monitor or assess the hazard itself. Secondly, you have to be able to, there has to be a way of getting this information to the people. It's not enough, like I was talking about the NOAA satellite in the United States of America, for those who are doing atmospheric analysis and all of that, keep the information to themselves. No, you have to have a way of taking this information to the people who will put them together and let it become public, in the public domain, so that people can react. The third part of it is there must be a way of helping people to get out of harm's way. That's why the emergency management people come, people like you will now come in. The information gets to you that, look, in this environment, we're going to have this kind of catastrophe and people should move in. Then, of course, the last stage is when you tell people to move, where do they move to? I was in Benue State some time ago, part of this thing I was talking about, and we met some community people somewhere, I think what they call this place in Benue State, in Makurdi area. I just forgot about the name now. And they say, okay, fine. They see the river Benue at the beginning of when the river is coming up, and they are told to move, but nobody tells them where to move to, and where are the facilities, where are the materials to move, and all of that. So the early warning system, it's really a robust thing. It's highly technical, but if we have time, we can actually talk about it. These 4 components of early warning system, but time will not permit me to go through all of that now. What I've just done is to give you an example. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. In fact, from what you've done already and what you said already about early warning system, I think anyone that is really smart and sharp will be able to find a pathway into exactly what you end up saying at the end. It's just that, like you say, it's technical, so it must involve some technicality, which we are not ready for now. But thank you. In fact, listening to your own narration on early warning system, I can say exactly that. Yes, I know better today. Okay. How many persons have I called? Let me just call 2 more to balance it up. Emmanuel Lepot.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Prof.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm really happy and delighted to be here. I was listening to you and Prof. I'm just happy because I'm a geologist.
Wow.
And I'm a geologist, did my master's in environmental resource management. So when they're talking about disaster, I was so happy. Because after seeing the natural disasters and a lot of things, you're trying to do the management of the environment, and now there's disaster coming, you want to manage. So I was so happy. Even when Prof was talking, I was thinking as if I was not in school for years. It was so brief, but so powerful. So I just Prof, there are some few questions I want to ask based on disasters. You know, we have natural disasters, then we have man-made disasters. And in Africa, our disasters are really peculiar. Just for us to engage and to participate in what most of us are doing, like some of us, we are working already, and sometimes we want to do community development work. And when Prof was talking about the 4 basemen, he was talking about the federal, the states, the local government, and the community. I was happy. But Prof, I don't know if they have like a volunteer community work or like a body in disaster management that someone can key in. Just for example, the environmental owned through NESRIA, we have what is called the Green Cup, that you check the environment and give reports in terms of flood, in terms of maybe someone is drilling borehole close to a septic tank. You write and give them reports. So I don't know if it's in disaster management, which is key, because we have a lot of disaster, even man-made disaster. Our man-made disaster is even affecting us in Africa more than natural disaster. So I don't know, Prof, if there is a body that someone can volunteer just as a community work, as you participate gradually before you look for the bigger job outside. Because when you check the developed countries, most of them even look very much on what you do for your community. And having a course like this, I think it will help us not only mitigate, not only even responding and giving issues to the community, but you can help other people, educate them so that you tell them what they need to do. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Over to you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you so much. You are right. We don't have in our country, we don't have many volunteer organizations or establishments. Maybe because of our economic status. Because when you talk about volunteer, it looks like you are doing the work without pay. But I know, and the youth, the young ones may not want to get into that. If you are doing something, you want to be properly remunerated and be paid for what you are doing. That is why the volunteer thing is not very popular in Nigeria. However, I know that NEMA has this volunteer group. They have this volunteer corps. What they do is that every year you have, when the corps come, the National Youth Service Corps personnel come, they have these volunteer group. The NEMA have actually tried to sell this idea to the people, but it's not really working because, like they say, copper comes and copper goes. And it looks like it's only the coppers that are working for NEMA that are into this volunteer corps thing like that. You see, we try to bring this volunteer thing into the 3 states we worked on, the Kaduna, Benue, and the Plateau thing. Like I said, we created this thing they call the DMMP and the the DMMP at the state level and the CDMMP at the local government level and the community level. And like I said, is a stakeholder, everybody who is interested in this thing. And people are working and they're not really getting paid, but people are happy doing this thing. So it is possible. Right now, there is no organization or maybe government organization or NGO that is actually spearheading this thing or managing these things. But we on our own, we can start the process. We can start or sell the idea to some of these NGOs, at least so that we can get some, people can be mobilized and resourced. You know, people need to be resourced to be able to move around and call for meetings and move around and do stuff. The possibility is there, but it's not been really explored in Nigeria as we have in other parts of the world. But it's a very good one. It's a good one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Sorry, I'm waiting for them to put on the lights in the office. Yeah, talking about volunteering, just like what the Prof said. If you remember, part of the thing we discussed is that after this program, we are going to form a international volunteer, disaster volunteer group. And we'll bring in that to Prof. Very likely is going to further us on how to go about it, creating departments and sections, and going to all the various areas that will need our services. So it's basically something that is going to develop, metamorphose into something big. He has already told us, and I think we have something that is going to come up big about volunteering. We have a course titled International Volunteering we've been running for the past 4 years. And it has helped a lot of people appreciate what it means or what it looks like to volunteer, both at home and abroad. And I want to believe that this very training, last time we had a training on climate change, the interest was overwhelming and people really, in fact, from all over Africa, we had students. And even here, we have students from different parts of Africa and other countries. They're all here. And it's not going to be too easy to pick them out. But for the volunteering, we will start, after creating it, yes, we can have people from different parts of the world, but we will start proper from Nigeria. This is charity begins at home. Then it can expand to other African countries and we take it up from there. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. I can see hands everywhere, but Gladys Amiadame.
Thank you. Good evening, Prof. Good evening, Doc.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this insightful presentation. Like everyone has said, it really came home for me, especially us that have been playing around the development sector. I just want to have one clarification quickly. When you were talking about hazards, does pandemic, an outbreak of a pandemic, does it fall within the level of hazards? And if it does, given our precedents or experience with COVID-19 and the Ebola crisis, how do we kind of have a mitigating response should in case there could be another pandemic? Because I've had to listen to a particular video, not sure if how true it is, but there's this speculations of a possible pandemic that will be much global than COVID-19. And with pandemic, do we also have an early warning systems put in place for such response? Thank you, sir.
Okay, over to you,
Yeah,
Prof.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, we call that biological hazard. Pandemic, the biological hazard. Epidemics, of course, the pandemic is what we call the senior brother of epidemics. You know, when the COVID-19 came, I mean, it was total. Recall earlier when I defined disaster, I said when the hazard impacts on the community, overwhelms the community, and the community don't have sufficient capacity to cope for which you have to call for external support and all of that. So that was what COVID-19 did to almost everybody. And people had to help across nations and all of that. So yes, the pandemic, the biological hazard, we can manage it if we go through those 3 items I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. Because remember I said, if we are interested in reducing our disaster risk, COVID-19, for example, was a disaster risk. One, I said we should know the hazard. We should be able to profile the hazard, do elaborate hazard assessment. I said also the second thing to do is to know our vulnerability, our exposure, our susceptibility, and all of that. And of course, the third one I said, it's the capacity. What do we have that will enable us to cope? Now, when you're talking about pandemic, we would need first to do what they call the surveillance. The medical, maybe we have some medical people among these over 1,000 people I'm seeing on the screen. We call it surveillance, hazard risk assessment. We should be able to assess that pandemic, know when it's likely to occur, what are the factors that predispose the hazard for occurring in the community and all of that. So if we're able to do that hazard assessment sufficiently well, we will be able to know what is there. Then again, we should be able to do vulnerability assessment in our community. We know that, for example, if you look at the whole city, not all parts of the city have the same level of vulnerability. Let me talk a little bit about this vulnerability now. The places, for example, we call the GROAs, maybe from the way they are designed and the kind of people that live there, they are less susceptible, they are less vulnerable than people who, let me use this word, it's a sociological word, people who live in the ghetto, in the slums, in the places we call informal settlements. People just go in there and start building and crowd up and things like that. Those guys are a little more vulnerable than people who live in this low density area and all of that. So we need to look at all the vulnerability and all of that. Then of course the capacity. As individuals, as community, as government, what do we have in case this thing happen? Like the COVID-19, there was no vaccine until this AstraZeneca, this Oxford University people and the Chinese and all these people started developing this thing. You see, now you're talking about maybe the next outbreak. What are we doing about it? Is anybody producing vaccine in Nigeria? Are we monitoring the development and progress of this next incident and things like that? We can be done as disaster managers if we know what to do, particularly looking at the whole thing from these 3 perspectives: the hazard itself, hazard assessment, vulnerability assessment, and capacity assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I want to believe we've done justice to this topic so that we can also have time to go and relax. Once again, I want to especially say thank you, Professor. Clearly shows that you are an authority in this field, and we'll always run back to you from time to time, more often than before, to get solutions, advice, and other good things from you as far as this area is concerned. Now, for those of you that have not paid for your certificate, you have till 19th. 19th should be Wednesday to pay for your certificate. And once it is 19th, please don't even bother to pay because you will not get it. So we did that extension so that everybody will be covered. And just know that you'll be answering some questions before you get a certificate. So if you don't pass, you won't get a certificate. But I can bet you that you will easily pass the test. Why are you surprised? I notice you are surprised that I say that. You're not supposed to just walk in and get a certificate. You're supposed to just answer some few questions. Very simple questions. Yes, even without attempting the course, coming for this course, you will pass. not to talk about now that you are now an expert. Yes, and as soon as we are through with this, we'll be pulling everybody together to join the volunteer group, international volunteer, disaster volunteer that is being created so that you become pioneer members. But I can assure you that good things is just about to start happening and you'll all be happy. For you to even have the interest, it shows that there's already a way forward for everybody to achieve their dream of working as disaster volunteer experts or whichever field. And like I also say, we are going to ensure that everybody gets training on how you can upload your profile on United Nations and United Nations volunteer database. It's you and United Nations and nobody in between. And nobody's going to do that for you, but we're going to show you how to do that. And also how to get jobs. We have to get jobs directly from United Nations with the fatherly support of Professor too, getting us jobs with NGOs, linking us up. I'm sure the sky is our limit. We've just started and we're going to get better news in all this. Thank you once again. I want to thank you all for your time, for your patience, for your understanding. This program was supposed to take place yesterday, but unfortunately, network refused. But today, we succeeded. And I'm so happy to know that you are all here together. God bless you all. I will make effort to record this now. To get this uploaded and the link sent to your class so that you can watch and also share with your friends for those that are not here. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless
Thank you, sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh my God.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Good morning.
Thank you.